At 0902 on February 19, 1945, Corporal Tony Stein struck the black volcanic sand of Iwo Jima carrying a weapon that officially did not exist. The gun weighed 23 pounds. It looked like something cobbled together in a junkyard by a mechanic with too much ingenuity and too little regard for regulations. An aircraft machine gun was bolted to an M1 Garand rifle stock, with a Browning automatic rifle bipod mounted at the front. A 100-round ammunition box hung from the side. A rough trigger assembly was welded directly to the firing mechanism. Nothing about it resembled standard issue. Everything about it was about to save lives. Stein served with Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. His landing craft grounded on Green Beach at the base of Mount Suribachi exactly on time. The ramp dropped. Stein and 30 other Marines surged forward into water that rose to their thighs. The mass of their gear dragged at them rifles, ammunition, grenades, entrenching tools, gas masks, rations. Each Marine carried between 60 and 80 pounds. They waded toward shore. 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. Still no enemy fire. That silence was wrong. Naval gunfire had pounded the island for 3 days. 74 days before that, carrier aircraft had been striking Japanese positions. Intelligence assessments said the defenses would be weakened. Intelligence had rarely been so mistaken. The Japanese had carved 18 kilometers of tunnels beneath the island. Reinforced concrete bunkers with walls 6 feet thick. Artillery emplacements hidden in caves, their interlocking fields of fire covering every meter of beach. 320mm Spigot mortars. Concealed machine gun nests camouflaged so perfectly you could walk past them without ever seeing the firing ports. 21,000 Japanese soldiers commanded by Lieutenant General Tadamaki Kurabayashi, a man who had studied every American amphibious landing since Guadalcanal and designed his defenses specifically to kill Marines with maximum efficiency. Kurabayashi ordered his men to hold their fire until the beaches were packed. Let them land. Let them believe the bombardment had worked, then destroy them all at once. The Marines advancing across that beach carried M1919 A6 machine guns. The A6 was the infantry version of the Browning M1919, fitted with a shoulder stock, bipod, and carrying handles so a single Marine could theoretically operate it alone. In practice, the M1919 A6 weighed 32 pounds empty. Add an ammunition belt and the load climbed to nearly 50 pounds. It fired .30-06 rounds at about 400 rounds per minute. When a Marine squad encountered a Japanese pillbox, they needed overwhelming fire delivered immediately. The Browning automatic rifle provided 20 rounds at 550 rounds per minute, effective in short bursts, insufficient for sustained suppression. The M1919 A6 could maintain fire, but it was too heavy to maneuver rapidly during an assault. What Marines required was a weapon combining the portability of the bar with firepower capable of suppressing a fortified position long enough for demolition teams to approach with satchel charges and flamethrowers. The Japanese bunkers on Iwo Jima had firing ports only 11 inches wide. The concrete absorbed machine gun fire. You could fire all day with a bar or an M1919 and achieve nothing beyond wasting ammunition and broadcasting your position to every Japanese soldier in range. The problem had been recognized 16 months earlier on another island by a Marine sergeant who refused to accept that the weapons he was issued were the only weapons he could use. Sergeant Milan Grebich of Mount Iron in Minnesota was a paratrooper with the 3rd Marine Parachute Battalion. The Paramarines were an elite formation created in 1940 to test the concept of Marine parachute infantry. They trained at Camp Gillespie in California with brutal physical conditioning, parachute instruction, advanced weapons training, and small unit tactics. The Paramarines never conducted a combat jump. The Marine Corps ultimately judged parachute operations impractical for Pacific Island warfare, but the training produced exceptionally capable infantrymen. In November 1943, the 3rd Parachute Battalion landed at Empress Augusta Bay on Bougainville as part of the 3rd Marine Division's assault. Bougainville was a jungle nightmare, thick vegetation, swamps, ridgelines. Japanese defenders exploited the terrain with ambushes from concealed positions, machine gun fire from camouflaged bunkers, and night infiltration attacks. The Marines needed more firepower than their standard weapons could provide. Grebich noticed something lying on the beach after the initial landing: aircraft machine guns and /M2 Browning .30 caliber guns salvaged from wrecked Navy aircraft, likely SPD Dauntless dive bombers that had crashed or been shot down. The IN/M2 was an aviation variant of the M1919, lightened for aircraft use with a thinner barrel and finely machined components featuring weight reduction cutouts. Its rate of fire increased to roughly 1,200 rounds per minute, nearly 3 times that of the ground version. The high cyclic rate was essential for aerial combat, where firing opportunities lasted only seconds. The problem was that the M/M2 used spade grips designed for fixed aircraft mounts. You could not carry it and maneuver with it the way Marines needed to fight. Private William Colby of Gloversville, New York, attempted a field modification. He attached a bipod to the muzzle of an M/M2. It was crude, but it worked. 2 days after the Bougainville landing, Japanese troops ambushed his squad during a patrol. Colby deployed the modified gun. His assistant gunner, Private Edward Cumlish of Wilmington, Delaware, fed the ammunition belt. The gun's extreme rate of fire drove the Japanese back. 1,200 rounds per minute sounded like a continuous roar. The Japanese soldiers, who had been advancing aggressively, dropped to the ground. They stopped firing. They took cover. A few seconds of suppression gave Colby's squad enough time to maneuver and break contact. The modification worked, but it remained rough. The gun still had spade grips, remained awkward to aim, and was still mounted on an aircraft cradle that made it heavy and unwieldy. It needed improvement. Grevich saw what Colby had done and pushed the idea further. His platoon leader was Lieutenant Philip Gray of Eugene, Oregon. Gray understood weapons. Together, they designed a far more refined version. They fitted an M1 Garand rifle buttstock so the weapon could be shouldered like a rifle. They added a bar bipod for stability when firing prone. They mounted a bar rear sight with windage and elevation adjustments. They fabricated a proper trigger assembly. The aircraft gun relied on an electrical solenoid activated by a button on the spade grips, a system that worked in an aircraft where the gun was rigidly mounted but failed for a shoulder-fired weapon. Grevich and Gray created a mechanical trigger that completed an electrical circuit when pulled, activating the solenoid and firing the gun. Simple, effective. The result was a weapon that could be carried and fired like a rifle while delivering 1,200 rounds per minute. They called it the Stinger, a name earned by its effect. One Marine armed with a Stinger could put more rounds downrange than 3 Marines carrying bars. Grevich and Gray completed their prototype on Bougainville but never used it there, as most of the fighting had ended by the time it was finished. The 3rd Parachute Battalion returned to the United States in early 1944. On February 29, 1944, the Marine Corps disbanded the Para-Marines, and all personnel were reassigned to regular Marine units. Grevich was sent to the newly formed 5th Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California. He was assigned to the machine gun section of G Company, 28th Marine Regiment. The 5th Division was being built from scratch specifically for future operations. Training was intense with live fire exercises, amphibious assault practice, combined arms coordination, unit cohesion drills, and physical conditioning. As Grevich trained with his new unit through the spring and summer of 1944, he became increasingly frustrated with the M1919A6 machine guns they were issued. They were too slow, too heavy, too cumbersome for the kind of close assault work Marines would face against fortified Japanese positions. Every island in the Pacific had shown the same pattern. Japanese defenses were getting stronger, more concrete, more tunnels, more preparation time. Taking those positions required getting close with demolitions and flamethrowers. Getting close required suppressive fire. The M1919A6 was not adequate for that mission. Grevich remembered the Stinger he had built on Bougainville. In November 1944, the 5th Marine Division moved to Hawaii. They established Camp Tarawa on the Big Island. Training intensified. The target was still classified, but everyone knew it was coming soon. Grevich decided this was the time. He approached his company commander with a proposal. He wanted permission to build improved machine guns using salvaged aircraft weapons. He explained the concept, showed calculations on rate of fire and weight, described how a prototype had worked on Bougainville. The company commander was skeptical but interested. Higher firepower for less weight sounded good. The problem was procurement and authorization. Where would Grevich get the aircraft machine guns? Where would he get the parts to modify them? Grevich said he would handle it. Do not ask too many questions. The company commander thought about it. His Marines were going to assault a heavily fortified island. If some sergeant wanted to build better weapons using spare parts and scrap metal, maybe that was worth overlooking regulations. He gave Grevich approval. Quietly, unofficially, Grevich went to work. He found salvaged A and M2 machine guns. Aircraft mechanics on Hawaii had access to aircraft graveyards. Damaged planes were cannibalized for parts. Sometimes parts disappeared before official disposition. Nobody asked too many questions about where a sergeant got surplus aircraft weapons in the middle of a war. His assistant was Private First Class John Little. Years later, Little would say about the parts, "I do not recall how or Where we got them, that was probably the safest answer. Grevich and Little worked at Camp Tarawa while the 5th Division prepared for deployment. They built 6 complete Stingers. Each one required precise work. Remove the spade grips from the aircraft gun. Attach an M1 Garand buttstock modify to fit the aircraft gun's receiver. Metal work with files and hand tools. Make it solid. Make it straight. The stock had to absorb recoil without cracking. Mount a bar bipod on the front that folded up when not needed. Add a bar rear sight aligned carefully. If the sight was off, the gun was useless. Fabricate a trigger assembly. This was the hardest part. The aircraft gun's electrical firing system had to be adapted to work with a mechanical trigger. Solder wires. Test the circuit. Make sure it fired reliably. Build a box magazine that held a 100-round belt of 306 ammunition. The magazine had to feed smoothly. Belt-fed weapons jam if the ammunition does not feed correctly. Paint the whole thing in camouflage colors to make it look intentional and professional. The finished Stingers weighed 23 pounds without ammunition. Add 100-round belt and you were at 25 pounds total. About 5%. Lighter than the M1919A6 with ammunition. The rate of fire was 1,200 to 500 rounds per minute depending on the specific gun. All of them were dramatically faster than the M1919's 400 rounds per minute. 3 times faster meant 3 times the suppressive effect on enemy positions. It meant you could put more rounds on target in the critical first few seconds of contact. Those first few seconds determined whether an assault succeeded or failed. If the enemy could shoot back immediately, the assault stalled. If the enemy had to take cover, the assault could close. The Stinger forced the enemy to take cover. Grevich finished all 6 Stingers in January 1945. Some sources say finishing touches were done aboard ship as the 5th Division sailed toward Uima. 5 Stingers were assigned to G Company 28th Marines. 1 went to each of the 3 rifle platoons, 1 to the demolition section, 1 carried by Grevich himself. He built the weapons. He would carry 1 into combat. The 6th Stinger went to a Marine from a different company. Corporal Tony Stein from Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines. Stein was not from Grevich's unit. The most likely explanation is that Stein helped build them. Tony Stein had been born on September 30, 1921 in Dayton, Ohio. His parents were Steve and Rose Stein, immigrants from Erdek in Austria, Hungary. The town is now in Serbia. They were German-speaking Jews who immigrated to America in the early 20th century to escape rising anti-Semitism in Europe. Stein grew up in Dayton. He dropped out of Kaiser High School during his freshman year. It was the Great Depression. His family needed income. Stein went to work. He became a toolmaker at the Delco Products Division of General Motors in Dayton. Tool making required precision, understanding how metal worked, how to shape it, how to join pieces together, how to make things that functioned reliably under stress. These were exactly the skills needed to build Stingers. When the United States entered World War II, Stein enlisted in the Marine Corps. He signed up on September 22, 1942, 1 week before his 21st birthday. He completed recruit training at Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, then went through Marine parachute training at Camp Gillespie. Stein joined the 3rd Parachute Battalion, the same unit Grevich served with. Stein shipped to the Pacific and saw his first combat on La Vela in the Solomon Islands, then Bougainville. On Bougainville, Stein earned a reputation. He was aggressive, skilled, fearless. He hunted Japanese snipers. During one operation, he killed 5 Japanese snipers in a single day. His fellow Marines started calling him the Sniper Exterminator. When the Para Marines disbanded in February 1944, Stein was reassigned to the 5th Marine Division just like Grevich. Stein was promoted to corporal and assigned as assistant squad leader in Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines. Different battalion than Grevich, but they knew each other. They had served together in the Para Marines. They had both been on Bougainville. As a trained toolmaker with machine shop experience, Stein had exactly the skills Grevich needed: metalwork, precision fitting, problem solving. It makes complete sense that Grevich asked Stein to help fabricate the stingers. The trigger mechanisms required careful work. The stock attachments needed to be solid. Stein could do that work. In exchange, Stein got one of the 6 guns. Nobody filed paperwork on this arrangement. Nobody asked permission from regiment or division. 6 Marines were going to carry unauthorized weapons into combat. On February 19, 1945, the 5th Marine Division loaded into landing craft and headed for the beaches of Uima. Among the 35,000 Marines in the assault force, 6 carried stingers. On the morning of February 19, Tony Stein waded ashore, carrying his stinger. The first waves hit the beach at 0902, 1 minute ahead of schedule. The volcanic sand on the beach was black, soft. Marines sank to their ankles with every step. For the first few minutes after landing, Japanese fire was light, sporadic. A few mortar rounds, some machine gun bursts. At 9:15, every Japanese gun on the island opened fire simultaneously. Machine guns, mortars, artillery, rockets. Korebayashi had waited. Let the beach fill with Marines. Let them think they were safe. Then kill as many as possible, as fast as possible. The beach became a killing ground. Explosions walked through the Marines. Machine gun fire came from positions that could not be seen. Men went down. Corpsmen rushed to help, got hit themselves. Equipment burned. Amtraks exploded. Landing craft took hits and sank. Marines scattered, found cover behind anything available. Disabled vehicles, shell craters. The terraces where the soft sand gave way to harder ground. Stein's company was tasked with moving inland toward the base of Mount Suribachi. Suribachi dominated the southern end of the island, a 546-foot volcanic cone. Japanese observers on top could see everything on the beaches. Taking Suribachi was essential, but getting there meant crossing open ground under fire from positions that had been prepared for months. Concrete pillboxes, coconut log bunkers, spider holes, tunnels. Every approach was covered by multiple guns. The 28th Marines advanced towards Suribachi 1 meter at a time. Every piece of cover was precious. Every movement drew fire. Stein did something nobody had trained him to do and nobody had authorized. He stood up. He walked forward in the open carrying his stinger. He drew Japanese fire deliberately. This violated every tactical principle. You stayed low, used cover, minimized your silhouette. Stein ignored all of it. He stood upright in full view of Japanese positions. Japanese gunners saw a Marine standing exposed. Easy target. They shot at him. Stein used their muzzle flashes to locate their positions. Then he opened fire. The Stinger fired 1,500 rounds per minute, 25 rounds per second. That much firepower from one weapon made Japanese soldiers duck. They got their heads down. They stopped shooting long enough to not get shot. Those few seconds were enough. While Stein provided covering fire, the rest of his platoon moved. They advanced from cover to cover, got closer to Japanese positions. Demolition Marines placed satchel charges against bunker walls. Flamethrower operators burned out firing ports. Riflemen covered the flanks. The system worked because Stein's stinger gave them the time and space to make it work. Stein attacked one position after another. Stand in the open, draw fire, identify the source, suppress it with the stinger. Let his squad assault with demolitions and flamethrowers. Move to the next position. Repeat. The stinger burned through ammunition at an astonishing rate. A 100-round belt lasted about 4 seconds at full cyclic rate. Stein could not carry enough ammunition to sustain the fight for long. He needed constant resupply. The solution was simple, but dangerous. Run back to the beach, get more ammunition, run back to the fight. Stein made that run 8 times during D-Day. Each trip was 600 meters across open ground under constant mortar and artillery fire. Japanese gunners on Suribachi could see the beach clearly. They dropped mortars and artillery on the landing zones continuously. Each time he ran to the beach, he found a wounded Marine, helped him walk if he could walk, carried him if he could not, got him to the aid station, loaded up with ammunition boxes, ran back to the fight. 100 rounds of 3006 ammunition in a linked belt with metal box weighs about 20 pounds. Stein carried multiple boxes, probably 3 or 4 boxes per trip. That is 60 to 80 pounds of ammunition plus his stinger plus his personal gear, running through soft volcanic sand under fire. 8 times. On one of those runs, a Japanese bullet hit his stinger. The round struck the gun and knocked it out of his hands. Stein picked it up, checked it. The gun still functioned. Minor damage. He kept going. Later in the day, it happened again. Another bullet hit the gun hard enough to knock it from his hands. The same result. Check it. Still works. Keep going. Somewhere during the day, Stein removed his helmet and shoes. The official Medal of Honor citation says, shoes. The helmet was heavy and reduced hearing. The shoes were heavy and slowed him down in the volcanic sand. Stein decided speed was more important than protection. He ran back and forth across that beach 8 times in socks or barefoot, carrying wounded Marines and ammunition while Japanese shells exploded around him. By the end of D-Day, Stein had personally killed 20 enemy soldiers, according to his Medal of Honor citation. That number refers to confirmed kills of individual Japanese soldiers. The actual number of enemy casualties resulting from Stein's actions was certainly higher. Multiple pillboxes with multiple defenders in each. Marines assaulting behind his covering fire. What mattered more than the body count was the tactical effect. Stein's stinger gave his platoon the suppressive fire they needed to assault fortified positions without taking catastrophic casualties. Marines could move while Japanese gunners were forced to take cover. That mobility was the difference between success and failure. Other Marines saw this. Company A's advance was faster and less costly than units using standard weapons. By nightfall on D-Day, every Marine in the 28th Regiment knew about the Stinger. The other 5 Stingers were doing similar work. 3 rifle platoons in G Company had them. The demolition section in G Company had one. Grevich had one. These weapons were all concentrated in the 28th Marines attacking Mount Surbashi. The Stingers helped reduce the cost of taking the mountain. High rate of fire meant better suppression. Better suppression meant demolition teams and flamethrower operators could get close enough to destroy positions. Flamethrowers were the most effective weapon against Japanese fortifications, but flamethrower operators had to get within 20 m to be effective. 20 meters from a machine gun position was suicide, unless someone was providing enough covering fire to keep the enemy suppressed. The Stingers did that job better than any other weapon the Marines had. Over the next 4 days, from February 19 through February 23, the 28th Marines fought their way up Mount Surbachi. Every meter caused casualties. Every position had to be reduced individually with demolitions and flamethrowers. The Marines used Bangalore torpedoes to blow holes in defensive lines, satchel charges to destroy bunkers, flamethrowers to burn out cave positions, grenades to clear tunnels, bayonets, and rifle butts for close combat when Japanese soldiers emerged from positions to fight hand-to-hand rather than burn alive. It was brutal, exhausting, terrifying, but effective. The 28th Marines took Suribachi one position at a time. On February 23, 1945, a patrol from Company E, 28th Marines reached the summit of Mount Suribachi. The patrol was led by First Lieutenant Harold Schreer. They carried a small American flag. The flag was from a landing ship, 54 in x 28 inches. At approximately 10:30 hours, they raised the flag on a piece of pipe. Marines across the southern end of the island saw it. Ships offshore saw it. A cheer went up. The first piece of Japanese soil had been captured. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal was on the beach observing the battle. He saw the flag go up. He decided he wanted that flag as a souvenir. Someone had the sense to tell Forrestal that the Marines who had just fought up that mountain might want to keep their flag. A solution was proposed. Send up a second, larger flag, raise it for a proper ceremony. Forrestal could have the first flag. A second patrol went up Suribachi later that day. They carried a larger flag, 96 in x 56 inches. This flag came from LST 923. The patrol included 6 men. Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal was also on the summit. He had climbed up hoping to photograph the flag raising, but thought he had missed it. When he arrived, the first flag was already up. Then he learned a second flag was being raised. The 6 men raising the second flag were Corporal Harold Schultz, Corporal Harold Keller, Private First Class Ira Hayes, Private First Class Franklin Sousley, Sergeant Michael Strank, and Corporal Harlan Block. As they raised the flag, Rosenthal captured the moment on film. He shot the photograph at 1/400th of a second. He Almost missed it. He had to swing his camera up quickly to catch the flag going up. The photograph became the most famous image of World War II. It appeared on the front pages of newspapers across America. It became a symbol of American determination and sacrifice. The photograph was later used as the model for the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. Tony Stein participated in the fight for Mount Suribachi. He was there for the advance from the beach to the base of the mountain. He provided covering fire for assaults on Japanese positions around the slopes, but he was not part of the flag-raising patrols. During the fighting around Suribachi, Stein was wounded. The wounds were not life-threatening, but severe enough to require evacuation. He was taken to a hospital ship offshore for treatment. His war on Iwo Jima should have been over, while Stein recovered on the hospital ship. The 28th Marines moved north up the west coast of Iwo Jima. The terrain there was different than around Suribachi. Broken volcanic rock, ravines, cliffs, natural caves reinforced with concrete and steel. The Japanese had turned the entire northern plateau into a fortress. Every ridge was a defensive line. Every ravine was a killing ground. Every cave was a strong point. The Marines advanced by meters. Casualties mounted steadily, men killed, men wounded, men evacuated for combat fatigue. The 28th Marines, like every unit on Iwo Jima, were being ground down by attrition. On March 1, 1945, 10 days after the initial landing, the 28th Marines were fighting near Hill 362A. The hill was in the northwestern sector of the island. The fighting there was as bad as anything at Suribachi. Worse in some ways, more caves, more tunnels, better fields of fire. Stein was on the hospital ship when he heard about it. His unit was in heavy contact. Men he had trained with were dying. Men he had fought beside on Bonneville and during the landing were in a fight for their lives. Stein made a decision. He left the hospital ship. Nobody authorized it. Nobody approved it. He just left, returned to Iwo Jima, went back to his unit, rejoined Company A on the front lines. His wounds were not fully healed. Medical personnel would have kept him on the ship for days, if not weeks. Stein did not care. His Marines were fighting. He was going to fight with them. On the morning of March 1, 1945, Company A was pinned down by a Japanese machine gun position. The position was well concealed in broken ground. Every time the Marines tried to advance, the machine gun opened fire and drove them back. Men were getting hit. The advance was stalled. Nobody could locate the exact position of the gun. Stein volunteered to lead a patrol to find and destroy the machine gun emplacement. 19 Marines went with him. They were going to reconnoiter the area, find the gun, call in support, assault if possible. It was a dangerous mission. The terrain favored the defenders. Broken volcanic rock provided good cover for hidden positions. Japanese snipers were active throughout the sector. They had learned to target Marines who looked like leaders. Stein was a corporal squad leader. He would be a target. The patrol moved out, advancing carefully through the broken ground, looking for the machine gun position. Japanese snipers were watching, waiting for targets. One of them had a clear shot at Stein. At some point during the patrol, a single rifle shot. The round hit Stein in the head. He died instantly. It was March 1, 1945. Stein had been in combat for 16 months. Vela la Vela, Bougainville, Iwo Jima. He had killed dozens of enemy soldiers, destroyed multiple fortified positions, made 8 resupply runs under fire on D-Day while evacuating wounded Marines, fought up Mount Suribachi, recovered from wounds, and returned to the fight without authorization. Volunteered for a dangerous patrol when his unit needed someone to lead. He was 23 years old. He had been married for less than a year. His widow was Joan Stamminger. She was 24 years old. They had known each other in Dayton before the war and married before Stein deployed to the Pacific. She waited for him while he fought on 3 islands, received letters whenever mail managed to get through, and worried every single day. On March 1, 1945, she became a widow, though she would not learn of it for weeks. The telegram would come in time. Joan would read that her husband had been killed in action on Iwo Jima. She would receive his personal belongings, his wedding ring, whatever letters or photographs he had carried, and eventually she would receive his Medal of Honor. Tony Stein's Medal of Honor was presented to his widow Joan on February 19, 1946. exactly 1 year after he landed on Iwo Jima. The ceremony took place in the office of Ohio Governor Frank Losh in Columbus. Admiral Richard Connolly presented the medal. He had commanded a naval task group at Iwo Jima and had witnessed the battle from offshore. Now he stood in the governor's office and read the citation. It detailed Stein's actions on February 19, 1945, his use of a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, his rapid covering fire that allowed his platoon to move into position, his standing upright to draw enemy fire so hostile gun positions could be identified, his destruction of Japanese fortifications, his killing of 20 enemy soldiers, his 8 trips back to the beach for ammunition, his carrying or assisting wounded Marines on each trip, his removal of helmet and shoes to speed his movement, his weapon being shot from his hands twice, his calm courage under relentless fire, his gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The citation made no reference to where the weapon originated. It did not mention Sergeant Mel Grevich or Private First Class John Little. It did not mention the months of work spent building the Stingers. The official paperwork simply described it as a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon and left everything else unsaid. Rose Stein, Tony's mother, was present at the ceremony. She stood beside Joan and watched Admiral Connolly present the medal. She wept. Her son had died a hero. The medal proved his courage, but it could not bring him back. Stein was initially buried in the 5th Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima, located on the western coast of the island. Rows of white crosses stretched across the ground, thousands of them. The cemetery was formally dedicated on March 21, 1945, while fighting was still continuing in the northern part of the island. Stein's grave was plot 5, row 6, grave 1107. After the war, families were given a choice: leave their loved ones buried on Iwo Jima or bring them home. Most chose to bring them home. Stein's body was exhumed and returned to the United States. On December 17, 1948, 3.5 years after his death, Tony Stein was buried with full military honors at Calvary Cemetery in Dayton, Ohio. He was home. His family could visit his grave. His widow could place flowers. The community could remember. Calvary Cemetery is a Catholic cemetery, and many veterans are buried there. Stein's grave is marked with a military headstone listing his name, rank, unit, Medal of Honor recipient status, and his dates of birth and death, September 30, 1921 to March 1, 1945. 23 years, far too little time, yet more impact than many people make in a full lifetime. The Stinger he carried on Iwo Jima is gone, lost like the other 5. It was likely destroyed during post-battle cleanup, or perhaps taken as a souvenir and later discarded or forgotten. The weapon that helped change Marine Corps tactics and saved lives no longer exists, but its influence remains. The lessons learned from the Stingers shaped how the Marine Corps thought about squad automatic weapons: lighter, faster, more portable. That evolution eventually led to the M60 machine gun adopted in 1957 and later to the M240. Each generation learned from the one before it. The 5 other Marines who carried Stingers on Iwo Jima had different outcomes. Sergeant Mel Grevich survived the battle. He carried his Stinger through 36 days of continuous combat, from the beach landing on February 19 through the final securing of the island on March 26. The 5th Marine Division suffered 2,482 killed in action, 19 missing in action, and 6,218 wounded in action during the battle. 8,719 total casualties, the highest casualty rate of any division on Iwo Jima. Grevich made it through. He survived where thousands did not. After Iwo Jima, the 5th Division returned to Hawaii, re-established Camp Tarawa, and began preparing for the next operation, the invasion of Japan. In August 1945, Japan surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the invasion was cancelled. Grevich went home. He spoke little about the Stingers after the war. They were a wartime improvisation. They worked. That was enough. Private First Class John Little also survived the war. He returned to civilian life and never spoke publicly about his role in building the Stingers. Years later, a historian researching the weapons located Little and asked him about the details. Little provided what information he could, saying he did not remember exactly where the parts came from or how they managed to complete the work without official authorization. That was probably true. Some things were better left unspecified. Private William Colby, who had built the first crude modification on Bougainville that inspired Grevich, also survived the war. His role in originating the concept was largely forgotten. The Stingers became associated with Grevich and Stein because they carried them on Iwo Jima. Bougainville came earlier and was less famous. Colby's contribution was overshadowed by events that followed, but without his initial attempt to adapt the M/M2 for ground use, Grevich might never have refined the idea. After the battle, Marine Corps ordnance officers examined the Stingers, or tried to. Most of the 6 guns were lost, likely destroyed in combat. Some may have been damaged beyond repair. Others may have vanished in the chaos of post-battle operations. When the war ended in August 1945, the Pacific was littered with discarded military equipment. Weapons no longer needed were dumped, burned, buried, or thrown overboard. Demobilization happened rapidly. Millions of men went home. Bases closed. Equipment was surplused or destroyed. No one had the time to carefully inventory every non-standard weapon. The Stingers were never part of the supply system. They had no serial numbers and no property books tracking them. When the war ended, they disappeared. Ordnance officers who knew about them wrote reports. The concept was sound. A lightweight machine gun with an extremely high rate of fire was valuable for assault troops. The reports recommended developing and issuing similar weapons. One report suggested replacing one bar in each rifle squad with a Stinger to increase suppressive firepower without adding weight. The recommendation was never implemented. The war ended before it could be acted upon. The Marine Corps demobilized. Development programs were canceled. Budgets were slashed. There was no time or money to develop new weapons while millions of existing ones were being surplused. But the idea did not disappear. The Marine Corps recognized that the M1919S6 was inadequate, too heavy and too slow. Squad automatic weapons needed to be lighter and faster, a realization drawn directly from combat experience. Marines who carried the M1919A6 knew its limits. Marines who saw the Stingers in action knew what was possible. That knowledge influenced future thinking. The Marine Corps took part in machine gun development programs during the 1950s, which eventually led to adoption of the M60. The M60 was approved in 1957 and entered service in 1958. It weighed 23 pounds, the same as a Stinger. It fired 7.62 by 51 mm NATO rounds at about 550 rounds per minute, faster than the M1919, slower than the Stinger, but more controllable for sustained fire. It was belt-fed, lighter than the M1919A6, more portable, and provided rifle squads with the suppressive firepower they needed. The M60 served for decades in Vietnam and later in the Gulf War before being replaced by the M240 Bravo in the 1990s. The M240 weighs 27.6 pounds and fires at approximately 650 rounds per minute. In 2017, the Canadian Historical Arms Museum built a replica Stinger for a television documentary. The project took 3 months. Gunsmiths relied on historical photographs and written descriptions to recreate the weapon as accurately as possible. They sourced an actual M2 aircraft machine gun, located period-correct parts from M1 Garand and bars, fabricated the trigger mechanism based on veteran accounts, built the ammunition box, and assembled the weapon. The finished replica looked right and weighed right. They test-fired it. The rate of fire matched expectations, around 1,500 rounds per minute. Despite the high cyclic rate, the weapon was controllable. The bipod in stock provided stability, recoil was manageable, and burst fire was effective. The replica proved the Stingers were neither lucky accidents nor exaggerated war stories. They were functional weapons that solved a real tactical problem. The Canadian Historical Arms Museum still possesses the replica. It is the only known Stinger in existence. Another replica was built for the film Flags of Our Fathers, directed by Clint Eastwood. The movie told the story of the Iwo Jima flag raising and the lives of the men in the photograph. The production company hired Get Manufacturing Incorporated to build a functioning Stinger for the film. They built it. It worked. But the scene featuring the Stinger was cut during post-production. The film focused on the flag raisers and their stories, and the Stinger subplot did not fit. The replica still exists. 2 replicas in the world, both built decades after the war. The original 6 are gone forever. The Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, stands near the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. The memorial depicts the second flag raising on Mount Suribachi, 6 bronze figures raising the flag. The monument stands 78 feet tall. The figures themselves are 32 feet high, and the flagpole rises 60 feet. The sculptor was Felix de Weldon, who created the memorial based on Joe Rosenthal's photograph. Every detail was carefully researched: the angles of the figures, the placement of their hands, the folds of their uniforms. The memorial was dedicated on November 10, 1954. Each year, thousands visit it. Most know the story of the flag raising. The photograph is iconic. The memorial is imposing. Very few visitors know the story of the Stingers, the weapons that helped Marines fight their way up that mountain. The flag raising was symbolic, representing American resolve and Marine Corps courage and sacrifice. The Stingers were functional, representing American ingenuity and Marine Corps adaptability and innovation. Both matter. Symbols inspire, but tools win battles. At the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, Tony Stein's Medal of Honor is on display. The exhibit includes his photograph and uniform, the text of his citation, and a brief description of his actions on Iwo Jima. It does not include a stinger. None exist to display. Visitors see the medal, read about Stein's heroism, and learn that he carried a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon. Most likely wonder what that means. The language is bureaucratic and vague. It does not convey reality. The reality is that Stein and 5 other Marines carried weapons that should not have existed, hand-built from salvaged parts, never officially approved or issued, violating supply regulations and armament standards, and saving lives. The black sand beaches of Iwo Jima remain. The island is now called Kyoto. The Japanese government controls access, allowing only official delegations for annual memorial ceremonies. The beaches where Marines landed are unchanged, black volcanic sand, steep terraces, terrain that made the assault so costly. Mount Suribachi still dominates the southern end of the island. You can still see the summit from the beach, the same view the Marines had 80 years ago. The bunkers and tunnels remain as well, rusted metal, crumbling concrete, collapsed cave entrances, silent reminders of a battle that killed 7,000 Americans and 21,000 Japanese in 36 days. The island is quiet now. No gunfire, no explosions, no screams, only wind, waves, and the cries of seabirds. The Marines who fought there are mostly gone. Tony Stein died in 1945 at the age of 23. The survivors who returned home are now over 90 if they are still alive. A few remain, but their numbers shrink each year. Soon there will be none. The Stingers are gone. The men who built them are gone or nearly so. What remains is the lesson. Innovation in war does not come from headquarters. It does not come from planning committees or engineering departments. It comes from people close enough to the problem to understand exactly what is wrong, creative enough to imagine solutions using whatever materials are available, and brave enough to try those solutions even when they violate regulations. Mel Grevich recognized that his machine guns were inadequate. He remembered a weapon built on Bougainville and rebuilt it. He received approval from commanders wise enough to encourage initiative rather than enforce rules blindly. Tony Stein had the skills to help fabricate the weapons. He received one of the 6 guns and used it to kill enemy soldiers and save Marine lives. If this story connected with you, take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten history from World War II. Subscribe for more stories about the innovation and courage that defined the Pacific War. Each account reveals truths official records often overlook. Comment below to tell us where you're watching from and what you think about this story. Our community includes veterans, active service members, historians, and anyone who appreciates the ingenuity of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.